Yes, and welcome back to the Fresh Arsenal podcast/show. If you're watching us on YouTube, this is the very first Fresh Arsenal show, aiming to bring one of these to you monthly. If you're listening as usual, there will be some visual cues that we will try and attempt to discuss that will make sense for you as well. But we really encourage you to come and have a look at the video version because I've put together some high-tech graphic slides for us to go through today. We've got a number of guests on the show. I'm really excited to welcome the likes of James Benge to talk transfers later on, and a few other people joining us as well. But to kick off, how else could we start other than myself and Pat? Welcome back, Pat.
Thanks for having me back. Excited to be part of this fresh look for this show, not a podcast anymore, I guess.
Yeah, well, I've called it show on the slides. So if you're watching on YouTube, it's a show, but we will be releasing it as a podcast still. But yeah, no, it's good to try something fresh, as you say, living up to the name. And what better time to do it? The season's finished as of yesterday. Give me your one word thought on the season, Pat.
Painful.
Well,
but I guess I say
that's because it's fresh.
I say that. However, I didn't feel much emotion in the previous 3 seasons, so I guess it's a good and a bad thing. Like even when we lost the Europa League final to Emery, there was just a sense of like chaos, and also just a sense of if I've never been so sure of going into a final and knowing that we were going to lose than that game. Like even when we lost 3-0 to City in the League Cup final, which we got trounced in, I felt that was a game. It was like so many narratives, like Giroud, like Hazard's last game for Chelsea, like so many things, and just always felt like we were going to lose that, and haven't really felt that much as much as I have this season for a while. So that's felt good and bad at the same time.
Yeah, completely echo that. The emotion is definitely back this season. So if you are watching on YouTube, we really appreciate you subscribing. We're a brand new channel, so we'll be kicking off with a massive 0 subscribers. So who knows,
Huge.
if you're watching this early enough, you could be the very first. The first thing we're going to chat through today then with myself and Pat is season awards. The season's finished yesterday at the time of recording. And I put out some polls on my Twitter at Ollie Price Bates over the last week or so. So what we're going to show on the screen is the fan sort of vote, and then Pat, we're going to sort of chat through cases for a few of them and maybe our own thoughts. So where else can you start other than player of the season? And I think when I put this out, it was pretty obvious what it was going to come back as for me, but maybe an intriguing second place has come in, considering his end to the season in Ramsdale. But before we get onto that, Pat, some thoughts on Saka this season?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's been absolutely sensational. I think he's got the most goals and assists of his age bracket, or under 23s. I don't remember what the stat is. That might have changed since that kind of was last out there. I think most goals and assists against the top 6 again as well. I think only not scored or assisted against Liverpool this season, which is really, really impressive. So he's kind of been there for us in those big moments. And I don't know if I'm right in saying this, but I think he's probably got the most go-ahead goals for Arsenal this season. So if you think about Newcastle scoring the first goal, if you think about Norwich scoring the first goal as well, away from home, there's been numerous examples of him scoring that goal that gets Arsenal ahead. Is it even Watford away where he scores that goal that puts us back ahead? The really, really nice goal. United puts us ahead with a penalty. Obviously, we ended up winning 3-1, so it wasn't the kind of like game-winning goal. But he's scored a lot of winning goals. This Villa as well, obviously. I think that's been really important. And the crazy thing is about him, he'll have a really bad game and still look like Arsenal's best player, which is when you know he is that guy in the team. So, I think probably clearly in a way been our best player this season. I think he is de facto our best player as well.
And when you frame it with what happened last summer as well, he did start the season a little bit slow, as did pretty much everyone that was part of that England squad. He's obviously going to have a full summer off this time around. I guess the downside is we're going to lose him and some of our more important players in that middle of the season. Potentially, hopefully, he doesn't come back with heartbreak again after Qatar. But yeah, I just think for someone so young to have come through that moment and put in, not just his best season yet, be Arsenal's best player and his explosive season, wasn't it? And we chatted about it before, Pat, and that we felt like Saka was about to explode. When Arsenal fans were sort of repping him as the best young player around, rival fans would always point to his goals and assist tallies not being very high. And as people who watched him every week, Arsenal fans knew this guy, it was just a matter of time before he added that bit of end product. And, he's still, 21? Yeah, it's scary to think where he could go from here.
And I'm just looking through some of his goals and assists this season, right? A goal and assist against Spurs at home. He gets that first, the first assist to Smith Rowe to put us ahead. Leicester away, an assist. Breaks the deadlock, Newcastle at home. Gets the assist for Lacazette's first goal in the Southampton at home. West Ham at home, he has an assist, and he looked frightening that day as well, didn't he? And then is it Leeds and Norwich that he gets the kind of winning goals in those? Unlucky not to be seen as the hero in that City game where he scores, and we all know we should have probably won, which is unfortunate. Brentford at home scores the second goal to kind of kill that off. Watford away in that crazy 3-2. I think he got a goal and assist. The winner against Villa. The ceiling goal against Chelsea, the penalty. United, that goal that kind of that put us ahead. West Ham away. I think these are big games, right? Like a majority of his goals and assists are against those. I've seen a lot of, and I really like the player, so don't get me wrong in saying this is in any way a criticism, but James Maddison's put up some really good numbers this season, and I think he's a player that you and I, Ollie, wanted at the right price in the summer. But I think 7 of his goals and assists this season have come against Watford in the league, which obviously, it's a lot easier to do that than against the big teams. And I think only 4 of his goal contributions have come against top half opposition. So, yeah, really good to see him doing it when it matters against teams that are really difficult to score and assist against as well.
Yeah, definitely. It shows he's the spearhead of the team. He's the player that the other players look for. And you can see it even when we're struggling. I mean, he had a pretty poor game against Newcastle, but just a few little drives and runs that he was trying to do to bring this team back into the game. He's definitely the leader of it. And with 85% of the vote, he is our fans' player of the season. And I think fair to say we both will agree with that one.
Was Aaron Ramsdale second in this poll?
So Aaron Ramsdale came out with 10% of the vote, which I found very interesting. I think if we'd done it in January, I wouldn't have been surprised. But I think his second half of the season has been no more than average for me.
Yeah.
So I think that he's really young as well. And in terms of goalkeeper age, he's like Saka's age, if not younger.
He's the second youngest keeper in the league after Melier, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot to come from him, but yeah, I'm surprised 10% view him as player of the season. Who would have been your second?
I think from a mixture of impact ability and also availability, I think it probably would have been between probably Odegaard, Gabriel, and Ben White. I probably would have lent Odegaard just because I think him and Partey have been the reason that no matter where we finished, I saw progress. I think we've sort of talked about this on the podcast earlier in the season. Like, where would be a failure for you? Like, would fifth be a failure? And I think it would have been a failure if we'd played how we did against kind of, Norwich earlier in the season at home, or against Burnley this season at home for really long periods of time. But I think, Partey and Odegaard especially have transformed this team as an attacking unit. And I know Arteta says we need another 20 or 30 goals. But I think we've only got, is it 8 or 9 less than Spurs this season, or 10 or something like that, 11? So I think the leap to City and Liverpool, which I think that where the standards are set, definitely we need to get there. But I think they contributed so well, those two players, into how well we played when we were good. And I think just because of availability, he's always there and never really looks that tired, Odegaard. I think I'll probably have him second.
Yeah, I think the next one is signing the season, so we can debate a few more of those. I guess just wanted to highlight Smith Rowe as well. He's not been great in the last few months, but neither has Ramsdale, and Smith Rowe's numbers, goal contributions have been really positive. So move on to signing of the season then, and Martin Odegaard has won this one with 43% of the vote. A bit closer, we had Takehiro Tomiyasu with 25%. I think had he stayed fit, he would be even closer to Odegaard there. And then Ramsdale in at 19% in third. What do you make of those, Pat?
Yeah, I think if Odegaard hadn't been on loan to Arsenal the 6 months prior, this would look a little bit bigger in terms of the difference. Then again, I think if, as you said, Tomiyasu stayed fit the entire season, he'd be a bit closer. But I think, again, clear winner here for me in terms of, value for money as well, in terms of the age, in terms of also, we've kind of had this history now of taking players that aren't necessarily superstars or the star in their team and making them into really, really top tier players. And you look at like anything from like Thierry Henry and Dennis Bergkamp, where things haven't quite worked for their first big move. You look at it from the likes of even more recently, like Van Persie was an outcast in Holland. Alexis Sanchez was kind of making way for better players at Barcelona. Same with Mesut Ozil, that he was sold to fund the Gareth Bale move. I think there's an argument to be made that this is becoming kind of the thing that Arsenal do. They take players who are clearly very, very talented from teams that are better than Arsenal, are bigger than Arsenal, and they quite often, or like kind of at the same level, and they kind of make them into focal points of their team. And one of the players that we're being linked with massively this summer is Gabriel Jesus, and you kind of look at him in that City team. He's not like the star. He's one of a collection of extremely good players that could definitely do the same thing in terms of coming in and becoming that kind of player for Arsenal. So yeah, I think Martin Odegaard this season, a lot of people will point to, oh, well, he's only got this many assists and this many goals, but like you watch him every day, every game, and I think I can only remember, like bearing in mind he's played most games this season, I can only remember like 3 or 4 games where he's been subpar. He's usually just excellent. Technically, like you hardly ever see him have a bad touch. I think probably apart from that Palace away game where he wasn't amazing. I think superstar footballer, really, really good, and excited to see what he can do with someone who can finish in front of him. Because I think in Saka and him, and I'm right in saying we've got 2 of the best chance creators in the league, and it's a shame. Don't want to make that Ozil excuse where it was like, oh well, he always had Giroud in front of him. But he's a player that makes players better, and he's the coach on the pitch as well, which is the last point that I'd like to add, which is pretty important.
Yeah, well, it's a big point because obviously the captaincy is coming up with Lacazette almost certainly vacating it. So I think Odegaard is taking the armband a few times, seems likely, particularly with Tierney's fitness, who was probably the closest candidate to him. And yeah, I'd echo fantastic player at that price, I think is what makes him for sure the signing of the season. I think Tomiyasu, if he can stay fit and keep playing as he is at his price as well, is going to be a fantastic signing. The only thing with Odegaard I'd like to see more is him being that stepping up in those sort of more challenging away physical games. If he's going to be the captain, that's a big part of what he's going to have to drag the team through some difficult spells. And I think at the moment Saka maybe does that a little bit better than Odegaard's capable of doing. So that's the next step for me for him. Still very young, we forget he's been around forever, but he's still one and a half years in the Premier League, and I think he's 23, 24 maybe.
Yeah, and I could definitely see a scenario where Martin Odegaard gets less goals and assists next season, but we're more impressed by him and Arsenal score more goals. He can be that type of player where, like, whatever the team needs, he can kind of add. Like there were parts of the season where like the only thing he did was pass to Saka in that inside right channel, and he did it so well that Saka basically just got chance after chance to run against a fullback 1v1 and then do something. And those are things that aren't reflected in the stats. And I think there have been games and periods where he's taken more responsibility. What I'd like as well, like the goal assist numbers he's got, no set pieces pretty much, apart from that one free kick goal against Burnley. And actually, I think he's probably one of the best best set piece takers Arsenal have had in a while. And I'd like him to take more of them. Like, I don't want to see Cedric taking free kicks or corners anymore. I don't particularly want to see Smith Rowe or Martinelli. I know that the set piece coach has kind of got them doing in swingers only, and it's been very, very fruitful for Arsenal this season. But by and large, like, you've got a really, really good set piece taker there that I think should be taking more set pieces, which is another thing on top of the kind of, let's get his numbers up next season. But let's also get someone who's really, really good at dead ball situations on them, because I don't think we've done that enough.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Next, then, you'll enjoy this one, Pat. I don't know he's far from your favourite player. We put out flop of the season. It's never nice to do negative ones, but we need a little bit of variety. And I think I put Pepe, Lacazette, Tavares, and Cedric as the 4. So Cedric actually is the 4th. So I was happy with that.
I was looking forward to Cedric rant. But the thing about why you can't say Cedric is the flop is because people know like what he is,
what you're expecting,
what you expect from him. So for him to be a flop, he'd have to play really badly, which I don't think anyone wants to see or would hope to see.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, Nuno Tavares is in there because I guess he was brought in the summer with the hope that, we had no backup left back for the second half of last season, potentially cost us in the Europa League final. And he was brought in to kind of fill that void. He's had some good moments, but he certainly had some poor moments, and most notably not being trusted by the manager, I guess, in that Brighton game, which could be what's cost us the top 4. So he's there for that. Lacazette, after Aubameyang left, had to deliver some brilliant numbers. And I don't think he scored from open play after Lacazette left. So after Aubameyang left, which is just remarkably bad, given that he was playing pretty much 90 minutes for about 12 games in a row.
And also playing with Saka, Odegaard, Smith Rowe, Martinelli. These are players that are like going to create opportunities for you. And I think apart from the Wolves game, which is actually where he started declining in performance, which he was excellent in. I think he had about 8 shots in that. I'd be shocked if he had 8 shots between that game and the rest of the season, which kind of sums it all up, doesn't he?
I think he had 8 shots on Sunday trying to score, but they were all going about 3 foot wide every time because he came off the bench and it was desperate to get a farewell goal. Man. But yeah, so Tavares with 13%, Lacazette with 19%, but the overwhelming winner, Nicolas Pepe, with 61%. And Pat, we've talked about it before, feels like decision time on Pepe. Maybe not decision time because I think the probably decision's already been made given the selection, but
I think he's also got a new agent as well, right? So I think
2 years left on his Arsenal contract.
Yeah, that's a decision that's definitely been made from both parties. As in Arsenal, Arteta clearly don't want him anymore, but also the fact that he's clearly looking at pastures new. You don't switch agents 4 weeks before the end of the season if you're not looking for a move, or maybe to renegotiate a new contract. And I'll be absolutely shocked if the latter's happening. So, yeah, I mean, Nuno Tavares, it's difficult to call him a flop, right? Because he's an £8 million backup signing. And actually, beginning of the season, I remember the Leicester away game where he was just like impenetrable at times. And all the attacks went down the other end because they just couldn't get past. He's too fast, too quick, too strong. And it's been disappointing to see what's happened since And I think it started from that Forest Cup game where he came off early, which he was, atrocious in. But I probably wouldn't have taken him off at that point. And yeah, it's difficult to call him flop. Lacazette as well, like he was part of the team that played the best football this season for Arsenal. So again, it's difficult.
And he got a number of assists.
Yeah, number of assists.
Noting.
Number of assists this season, even if the goal tally has been awful. I think the thing about Nicola Pepe is that 72 million price tag has never escaped him. And I don't think it ever escapes players that are can you remember the last time a player started badly with a big fee and then like suddenly came good? It never happens, and it never happens for a reason. They either come in, they hit the ground running, or they are a flop, or they do something like Fred has done, who cost 50 million, was awful when he came in, then becomes one of like United's most pivotal pieces in the middle because they're that bad that they need him to be decent. There's not really any in-betweens usually. Like you kind of seen it with Lukaku at Chelsea, saw it with Lukaku at United, you saw it with, Coutinho at Barcelona, and so on and so forth. I mean, I know Ousmane Dembele's had a really good season second half of the season this year, but like looks like he's going to leave on a free. It just always happens this way. And yeah, I'm it's obviously gutting that he hasn't done well. We clearly kind of got sold a dream on what he was and wasn't to some extent. And I think the agents involved in terms of Raul and Jorge Mendes facilitating that transfer, it all reeked a bit from the start during that kind of transfer window. But then, he's had moments, right? He's had moments, but overall, I think it's been a really disappointing transfer. And I think it's a massively disappointing season as well.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to argue with what you said or the results of the poll. I guess my one sort of backing up case for him would be the manager's clearly not fancied him, and I think last year with the whole Willian thing, took so many minutes off him only to release Willian anyway. Just gave him no chance really. It felt like he never had a chance to consistently hold that place down. And then unfortunately for him, our best player, as we've seen in the vote, has found his best position in Pepe's position. So it just feels like the right time to part for all parties, and hopefully it does happen. Hopefully we get some of the money back. I'm sure the press will love tweeting how much money we've lost on that deal, and you won't hear much about
Pogba.
Paul Pogba, who United have let go from their academy for free, re-signed for 90 million or something,
and given him crazy wages as well. Remember?
Yeah, and then let him go for free again. Probably to the same team, it looks like.
Yeah,
as well, which would be hilarious.
Crazy. The thing I'd say as well, yeah, you make two really good points. He's had two things go against him in that Saka's come onto the scene and become our best player within like 2.5 years. Willian was signed, took some of his minutes. I think the other thing that went against him was that thing that we thought was going to be the thing that powers us back to top 4 at some point, which was Lacazette, Pepe, and Aubameyang playing together. Never ever looked good, did it? Like there was the FA Cup final where it looked decent, but it kind of felt like, oh, that's just two experienced players playing up to the game, and then also Pepe having a good game individually. Like I don't think it was like a ever cohesive unit. And it certainly wasn't one that like broke teams down. Like if you kind of imagine us playing those three right now, compared to having Odegaard, Martinelli or Smith Rowe and Saka and then Lacazette up top, it just never ever worked, that threesome. So whilst we thought it was going to be the trident that takes us back to the Champions League, I also think a lot of our eggs were in that basket. And look, he's not been fancied by two coaches. I think also the fact that Emery didn't want him was also not a great thing. Like Emery wanted Zaha reportedly, got Pepe, was told that's the player he has to work with. And I think he's just had a bad time at Arsenal overall.
Yeah. No, that's
I
fair
also
enough.
think not having Europa League football this season or European football has been bad for him.
Yeah, because he did get into a bit of a stride in the previous season. Got some good numbers in there. Hopefully, prospective buyers will remember that when you're watching his Europa League highlights. Final award then for us to chat about today is the closest of them all, and quite an interesting one, this. So we asked people on Twitter, most improved player of the season. We had over 1,000 people respond, and I had to choose 4 for the vote. So the 4 I chose were Thomas Partey, Emil Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka, and Gabriel, the centre-back. Not going to try and say his last name. Really close then. So Thomas Partey came out on top with 30%. Emil Smith-Rowe 25%, Bukayo Saka 24%, and then Gabriel, the centre-back, 21%. Pat, who do you instinctively go to here if you had to choose one?
It's tough. Like when I looked at this one, I was like, what did these players look like last season? Thomas Partey was a player that couldn't stay fit. We all knew was talented and had it in his locker. We just wanted to see more. That was part of the frustration from a lot of people, right? So I don't think he's improved that much as a footballer. He's just kind of showcasing his talents, really. So I don't know if most improved is the right. I'd say most improved in terms of performances, yes, but in terms of as a player, I don't know. Smith Rowe this time last season, again, like where was he and what was he doing?
Yeah, just looked up. He had 2 goals and 4 assists in 20 Premier League games this season. Less assists, 2 assists, but 10 goals in 33.
Yeah. And then Bukayo Saka was still looking like becoming our best player at that point, or at least most important one. I look at actually Gabriel and I think you're talking about last season, a player that like couldn't play if David Luiz wasn't playing because there was the language barrier. He wasn't trusted to play with Rob Holding. And I think this season, the partnership he's built with Tierney, the partnership he built with Ben White, I think was a big reason, even when we weren't playing well or trying to see out games, that we did. And also like 5 Premier League goals. Is he like our 3rd top scorer or something like that? I actually probably am good. I actually have to say he frustrates me sometimes on the ball, and I think he has those kind of bozo dumb moments. But I do think he's probably been our most improved player of this season. If I look at like the player we saw last season.
Yeah, I think the moments you talk about are getting less frequent, which is a sign of improvement. And I think I'd agree. I think there's cases to be made for them all. That's why I put them all as the 4 nominees, and I can see why it's close. But yeah, I just think, as you say, he had a very experienced David Luiz next to him last season. His brilliant season at Lille was next to Jose Font, a very experienced defender as well. And I did feel when we brought in White, or even when it looked like Saliba may come back and partner him, I did worry about how he would cope with that. But he stood up and become a man, and you can see he's improving every season. So yeah, another player that we're saying about a lot of these players towards the top of the awards that can still get better and will get better, I'm sure. Saka would probably be the close second for me. I know he was becoming our best player, but I think stats-wise, this is a season he exploded. And as I say, given the circumstances as well, I think, and he's just become the main player in the team. Obviously, a lot of the focus on the likes of Aubameyang when they were around, but Saka's just come forward and made himself the spearhead. So good to see that we're having conversations about several players, though, that are improving. I guess, Pat, that's a positive because
I always think like there are seasons, like everyone can do the predictions at the beginning of the season. There are always players that surprise you, right? And they go well above what you thought they would do. I look back at like, we signed Ozil and Aaron Ramsey basically was our best player that season in a team that had Ozil, Santi, etc. We've seen Saka come out of nowhere, Smith Rowe come out, well, not nowhere, they were academy products, but still to be performing at like top tier in their age group caliber levels is really amazing. Like playing Granit Xhaka in like a more advanced role, who would have thought that would have been not terrible? Tomiyasu being as amazing as he would have. Like Gabriel Martinelli hardly played at the start of the season, like first half of the season. at some points this season, he was like the number one name on the team sheet. So it is sometimes very difficult to predict how players will fare in a season. And I think when we're doing these predictions next season, it's going to be easier to do so. Because if you look at, like, I don't know, a team like Liverpool, who a lot of Arsenal fans are saying we aspire to be to or become, you kind of look at, well, who's going to be their main player this season? There's never going to be any surprises, right? So I think, let's see how these guys keep improving and keep doing better. Like, we still haven't seen Thomas Partey play a full season. We've seen Smith Rowe have COVID and injuries. We've seen Saka take up his goal tally, but can he take it up to the kind of Son and Salah levels in the next couple of seasons? Can Gabriel be kind of a de facto captain without an armband next season? These are all the things that they'll keep improving on, and there'll be other players that kind of no doubt.
I think Martinelli's one that springs to mind that you hope for next season can have a bit of an explosive year in terms of numbers.
Yeah, I think the writing's on the wall with that one, in terms of at some point the numbers are just going to go crazy with him. I know the underlyings are mad and a lot of the stats boys love him. So, and on the eye, you can see he just looks dangerous all the time. So that's to come, I'm sure, next season.
Cool. Well, those have been the season awards. Thanks for joining, Pat. And I'm sure regular listeners on the show will know where to find you. But if anyone is watching you for the first time, do you want to shout yourself out?
You can find me on Twitter at Pet Berisha, PetBerisha.
Awesome. So we're now on to the squad building section of the show, and delighted to welcome back to the podcast is James Benge. James, thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yes, so we're talking the day after the season's finished, and immediately into that transfer chat. And I'm sure you're ready for an uninterrupted summer of transfer madness.
Yeah, it's it really is the worst part of the job. I know there are a lot of people that enjoy it. I don't. It's a nightmare. But I mean, hopefully, kind of talking about Arsenal here, I think one thing you'll kind of be aware of is there's maybe not much to shock you. And who knows, there may be things that none of us know about. But you people will know the names by now, and they'll have an idea of what's on the radar. And obviously, we really all know, because we've watched Arsenal this season. We know what they need to do and what they want to do, because how could you not notice where the big problems in this team are?
And it feels like a big summer, doesn't it? I was just doing a summary piece for the podcast for a feature on BBC this morning, and it said what was the key learning point from this season, and I couldn't get past what we did and didn't do in January. That was clearly a long-term move from the club. They didn't want to commit to anything and tie themselves in knots and give themselves problems that they've just got out of. And I don't think you can argue that the squad was weakened in January, because we didn't bring anyone in. We let a lot of players go. And it could well have cost us this season. Who knows? But the club will say that that's a long-term decision, and that this summer is the time where they've got to plug those holes. And with European football again, they've got to plug quite a few holes. Do you feel that's kind of a big part of, I guess, judging Arteta and Edu this time next year? Will we see if the long-term decisions have worked out?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're absolutely right to say that January could have been very different. I think we will never quite know what difference having Callum Chambers, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Pablo Mari, and even, let's be honest, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang would have made to this team. I think we all feared, everyone that sort of covered Arsenal feared for them that maybe losing Aubameyang could just there could be one or two games where if he were on the pitch, if he were in the squad, he might be the break glass in case of emergency striker. And of course, we don't know how much meaningful impact he could have made. Whether that, I mean, we know there was no real willingness from Arteta to mend those bridges that had been so burnt in the previous year. I have more sympathy in terms of them not going out and committing long-term money. I think we should kind of always point out that there are things you can do in the short term. There were players offered to them on loan, maybe not the highest quality of players, and we know from sort of a Denis Suarez that not every loan signing is Martin Odegaard. But I don't think it's unreasonable to sort of question whether they could have done something a bit more to give themselves some squad depth, to give themselves a look at players without having to throw 80 million at a striker you're not sure of. Because looking at this summer, I think the reasons for sort of optimism are that everyone knows what needs to be done, and they've had a long time to work it out. They've done a lot of scouting. I was told that this scouting mission for the strikers, although they know the ones they want, they've been watching every single game down to the last day. It hasn't stopped, and they keep an eye on players that are lower down on the radar. They make sure they're abreast of every possible forward. I mean, people in the game have been blown away by the level of depth they've gone into in terms of scouting players. So there has been real hard yards done, but it's no guaranteed thing. Whether it's Gabriel Jesus, who knows what he's doing in the Premier League, or someone else, you just don't know until they pull on that shirt. And these are the big transfers that can make or break a team. I think we know Arsenal can get a fair bit better with a good striker. I'm intrigued if they got if Gabriel Jesus turned out to be the one, how much better? These are transfers that when you make, you can't really unmake very easily, as we're seeing with maybe the last record signing Arsenal made, and as we saw with Aubameyang and as we saw with Lacazette. It's hard to fix these problems if you make them for yourselves in the transfer window. Very expensive, so it is critical, and there'll be no excuses for getting it wrong. It has to be said,
and even more so this summer. I mean, if Eddie goes as well, I mean, Lacazette seems for sure. There might be a very slim chance of Eddie, but say we bring in two. I mean, it's hard to think of a team this high up a table that's ever sort of lost all their strikers and had to completely rebuild in one summer. And that's why I think a lot of people were keen for something to happen in January, just so we didn't have to have a complete transition in one window. But it's going to be really interesting and really exciting to see. And I wanted to chat through what people should now see on the screen is our most used 11 on the left. And then on our right, we've got our second most used 11 in the Premier League. And that may surprise some because it probably feels like we've barely had Tomiyasu and Tierney. So maybe some expected them not to be actually the most used, but they have played more minutes than Tavares and Cedric. But James, when you look at the right, does that just sort of sum up the problem with Arsenal and why we fell short?
Yes, I think it, that you see where the issues in the squad depth are pretty clearly, don't you? At fullback, you drop off from Kieran Tierney and Tomiyasu, who I would be perfectly comfortable with Arsenal kind of running those two out as and when fit, and that is a particular question with Tierney. I would say I'd be very happy with them running those two out. I'm convinced that they could get top four and make a real good show of themselves. But Nuno Tavares and Cedric are not of the standard required. I think you could make a similar argument in midfield. Mo Elneny's had some fantastic games, and obviously he's signed a new contract, 1 year with an option to extend, club option. Valuable, but as your sort of fourth midfielder, kind of alongside Lokonga, I would want that to be Granit Xhaka. I think that would be great. A lot of talk about his future. I think if he would be willing to be the first reserve midfielder, I think that would suit him really well. And then you kind of look at the front three. Of course, again, Eddie's sort of another one that has maybe outperformed expectations. And Gabriel Martinelli shows that there's a little bit of depth there. And I think Martinelli and Smith Rowe, you'd be pretty confident on the left wing. But Arsenal's record signing is what I would think he's probably got the sixth most minutes of forwards there, looking at it. And as much as he has his very loud defenders on social media, I don't think anyone can argue that he shouldn't be sort of sixth in a depth chart next season if he's still there. And the only reason I say if he's still there is because when I've seen him of late, I wonder who would pay to sign him. And that has to be a sort of cause for concern. But yeah, I mean, the drop off between the first 11 and the second is massive, and then there are also two, I think, pretty clear areas that could be upgraded in that first 11 in Alex Lacazette and Granit Xhaka. And if you can make them better, I think you've got a really strong first 11, and then you do need to polish that off with some depth as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, when you look at the second most used 11, I should explain for people still listening on audio to the show, we've got Leno in goal, a back three of Tavares, Holding and Cedric, and I say three because there isn't a fourth senior centre-back.
Is this just because Arsenal always have players sent off?
We've had two players sent off from the backup 11. In midfield, it's just Lokonga and El Nene. And I think what's quite obvious there is the reliance on Odegaard, because those two centre midfielders, some will say that Smith Rowe could come in and play in that role. But, we've whined about the injuries we have had. I'm a bit less excusing of the club from that, because I think in terms of amount of injuries we've had, I know we've had them to key areas, but we haven't had a huge amount. Next season, it's very possible that we start the season and Odegaard's out for 3 months or something. We've not had to deal with a lot of scenarios that could occur. And what frustrates me, I guess, about what the club haven't done today is Tomiyasu, we probably didn't know was going to get so injured, but Tierney and Partey, I mean, it was quite predictable, right? And Lokonga was essentially bought, we thought, to sort of decrease that drop off from Partey. He's not really happened, not really shown to be able to play that role at the moment. And the same with Tavares. So the club did, I guess, try and address those two things last summer, James, but it seems that they haven't, or to the level required. And I'm intrigued what you think about Tavares and what you think might happen there.
Yeah. So certainly Arsenal are looking at another fullback, Aaron Hickey, a name that everyone will have heard listening to this podcast. It's not really progressed as far as people would say, but there is certainly interest there. And I think then with someone like Nuno, and I was thinking this yesterday at the Everton game, there's clearly something there. He just needs time, and maybe he kind of never really gets it. But I thought at the sort of relatively cheap price they paid for him, I think it's a kind of punt that hasn't necessarily backfired. Like you say, it's tough with Tierney because everyone should know that there's injury issues in the post with him. I think a good season for him may well be 25 starts in the Premier League. So you need a solid backup option there. Nuno isn't that. And, send him out on loan to somewhere where he will play 30 games a season. I mean, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if you were sure he'd play to almost send him to a sort of old-fashioned English coach. I know he's not in the work at the moment, but, genuinely like a Sam Allardyce or Roy Hodgson, who will stick him in a flat back four, tell him, when the centre-back does this, you do that. I think that would help really well. I mean, with Lokonga, it's tough. The Partey role is really tough. And what is fair to say is that Thomas Partey had those injury issues last season, and he certainly has this as well, but he didn't before he arrived. So I kind of, with that, I would be inclined to sort of let it slide a little bit from Arsenal's perspective that they didn't spot the issue last summer. But they need to make sure they have someone who can step into the fray. It might be El Nene. It's basically the role he's been playing in the last few games. It might be a combination of him and Xhaka. And we'll come on to talk about the central midfielder. But yeah, aside from everything else, you need to make sure that if you're losing key cogs, the drop-off isn't quite as noticeable as it is. And I think that's particularly the case with Tierney, with Partey. I mean, I hadn't even thought of the Odegaard issue, but it could be one because he has very quickly become fundamental. The play runs through him, and what was really apparent against Newcastle was when he has an off game, Arsenal can't progress the ball up into the final third. They can't get quick ball to the attackers. Now, maybe Smith Rowe can do that role, and it's just that Odegaard's been playing so well. We've not seen him do that very often. But I think you'll need options. You need versatility. maybe that comes in signing the fall, because all of this won't get fixed this summer. It just won't. And I think maybe Ødegaard is you're gonna be very reliant on his fitness, is one way to put it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Ødegaard's one example. You look at centre back. We've been quite lucky with keeping our first choice duo fit most of the season, because we left ourselves with just Holding post January anyway. So yeah, as you say, there is a lot to do. On Tavares, I just feel people forget sometimes how young he is, and the fact that he never was a regular for Benfica, so he's never played regularly anywhere. And I do feel that perhaps a loan does make sense if we can get in someone like Hickey. But I definitely felt that way if we got Champions League, James. But now we've got Europa League, it feels like one of those seasons where some people maybe stick around till January to get that group stage Europa League football, and then make a decision on them in January.
Yes, I think that is very true indeed. I think there are a few people, kind of the returning loanees as well, that some group stage Europa League football would be no great problem. And I think that might be true of a Nuno Tavares as well. I mean, yeah, you've got some names sort of on that squad there, on that slide there. So, you know, with a lot of these returning loanees, there is a will from all parties to part ways. But you know, we've seen that before with Arsenal players, and it doesn't actually translate into a permanent exit. So
yeah, and I think as we discussed on the previous slide, so much work to do, holes to fill. There's some names on here that have had pretty good seasons. I mean, the obvious one is Saliba over in France, which causes a great debate, and I'm sure there'll be many more meltdowns based on words he says or doesn't say in the next few weeks. But that's a big one, because as we saw, we've only got Holding as a backup. So, James, do you have any thoughts or insight to what's going to happen there? Or just kind of instincts?
Yeah, so in the coming days, obviously we're recording this just after the end of the season. In the coming days, they will sit down with Saliba's representatives, and you know, have frank conversations that map out how Arteta views Saliba sitting in his plans, and what Saliba wants, and whether there will be interest in signing a new contract. And it will go from there. I think no one really knows quite what the next steps are from here, but I think everyone understands that now is a good time to make this decision. He has come off a fantastic season with Marseille that has increased his value, that has shown, I think, that he could be a very valuable player to Arsenal. So as much as everyone wants to catastrophize and get angry about Ben White, you know, this is not, it's not the end of the world. He's upped his value. I don't think Arsenal should look to sell him. I think he should come in and be, at the very least, the third centre back. And if he plays well enough, no reason why he couldn't overhaul White or Gabriel. And clearly he has the talent to do that. But I mean, right now, the truth is, it's kind of all down to these conversations over the next few weeks. He, of the sort of senior players, you know, the players that were signed for the first team, he's probably the only one that I could really see coming back, or, you know, barring the market for them totally drying up. I mean, Hector Bellerin, as well admired as he is, and rightly so among Arsenal fans, my understanding is he just doesn't want to come back. You know, that ship has sailed, and there's a lot of affection there. Well, there's been a lot of affection there from Bellerin to Arsenal, but he really wants a fresh start. Whether it's at Betis, that will be an option, but he does also have interest from elsewhere. Torreira, it looks like Fiorentina won't just pay the loan option, but that they will try and get that deal done. I don't know what happens with Maitland-Niles.
It feels like Fiorentina will take their chances with Arsenal's notoriously bad selling.
Yeah,
because he's had a great season. I think the option's about 12 million?
Yes, or is it 15 million euros, maybe 12 million pounds,
yeah. So I mean, it seems like a decent deal to just activate that, but I have a suspicion that Fiorentina will try and Probably if they activate it, do they have to pay it all in once or something? And
They wouldn't have. I don't think they'd have to pay it all at once. But like you say, Arsenal have not developed a reputation for effectively holding clubs over a barrel to get the maximum fee. So, I'm not surprised that Fiorentina are trying to save themselves a few million. I mean, we've seen this with people like Ospina and.
Do you think this is sort of damaging to us? I know if you want a player if you want a certain type of player, get him and obviously get rid of the ones you don't want. But there's got to be a line, I guess, where if there's a certain amount for Torreira that's not coming up, you don't sell that far below his market value just because he's a decent footballer. He could play. He could have done better than some of our midfielders in some games this season. And whilst I get the strategic plan, I just feel like if we end up selling him for something like 7 million and then spending 30 million on a centre midfielder, it just seems like sometimes we need to stand up a bit straighter and be willing to flex depending on what happens in the market.
I completely agree. And look, if you think that agents and rival clubs didn't see the spree of paying people to go away that happened over the 12 months from January 2020 to January 2021 to this January, you're deluding yourself. And this is merely speculation on my part, but let's take someone like Bellerin, who has 1 year left on his Arsenal contract when he comes back and is on very good money. And bizarrely, this was a deal we all would have said at the time was a fantastic bit of business for Arsenal. But to get Bellerin for 6 years at 120 grand, but it's a big salary for other teams, and they will look at I would be shocked if they don't explore the option of tearing up Bellerin's contract and letting him go for free at some stage. I just can't imagine that it won't come up, because clubs that are interested in him will think, let's take this down to the final days of the window if we have to. And we know Arsenal will blink that they are sufficiently beholden to Arteta's view of having a cohesive squad that they would rather pay a player to go away than have someone that doesn't want to be there. That is a real problem, and it's the same, like you say, with Arsenal continually taking bargain basement fees for solid players, young players. Guendouzi and Mavropanos both going for less than their market worth, it's fair to say. And I think, of course, Fiorentina will look at that and say, we can do the same with Torreira. I agree with you. I think Torreira would be a decent option for this Arsenal squad. I think if you're saying they want to play a real 4-3-3 with eights, he's not, I do very well remember how upset he was when Unai Emery put him a bit further up the pitch. But I think if you had him doing a sort of Xhaka style shuttling box to box role, he'd be fine at it. But I mean, do I see that happening? No, not really. I don't think that's. But yeah, I agree. I think at some stage you kind of should be able to say, if you're not paying him his market worth, we don't think he's a bad footballer, we'll keep him around and see what we can make out of him. Yeah, I agree.
Totally. The last thing I guess on this slide to note is the players like Nelson, Balogun, Norton Cuffy. Does Europa League, I guess, be a benefit for them, really? Because I guess if we had Champions League, where would the minutes come if they did come back? But this could give them an opportunity. I'm curious about Nelson particularly, though, because I think he's now down to another year.
Yeah, they just about got him to sign a 1 year extension when he went to Feyenoord, but again, it was because nothing permanent came up. I think if there are opportunities to sell him permanently, all parties kind of would agree with that. Norton Cuffy is an interesting one. I've been asking the question a lot and haven't got an answer. What I would think, my suspicion would be that we'll see him a bit in pre-season and they'll make the call from there. I don't have guaranteed word on that, but a few sort of suggestions that he'll get some minutes in pre-season, get some time with Arteta. But wouldn't shock me if it was Championship. He's way ahead of schedule. He wasn't supposed to go out on loan, but he's done so well that, you know, he did so well before going out on loan and has done so well at Lincoln. I would think he maybe ends up in the Championship at some stage, but like you say, it could be a good one for the Europa League group stages and then loan him out from there on.
And I guess depends what we do in the transfer market as well in that position, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. Finally, then, I just wanted to bring up a couple of quick questions that have come in. The first one is not getting top four, what that does to our transfer targets. As you say, a lot of us have heard all the names we've been linked to. And I guess the first one we thought, oh, is that going to happen? Still was Gabriel Jesus, given that he's, you know, competing right at the top of the league. There has been a little bit come out overnight from Brazil, sort of suggesting that it shouldn't affect things.
Yeah, that's what I'd heard. Yeah,
but I've also seen this morning Tottenham being linked classically after pipping us to fourth. So I guess, yeah, what are your thoughts on Jesus and the effect on that, but also the overall transfer targets this summer?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'd heard on Jesus was it would not kill the deal at all. You know, for him, a big part of this is getting back into the Brazil squad, and that means playing regularly, and that will be a key consideration for him. And so that's interesting with Tottenham. I would wonder whether Antonio Conte has a plan for Jesus that involves him starting week in, week out, when, you know, understandably, he's not going to start ahead of Kane, Son, and arguably Kulusevski. So, you know, it is a factor. And I've certainly spoken to players that Arsenal, or agents and people close to players that Arsenal have been tracking, that have sort of said, of course it matters, but it isn't the be all and end all. You know, if there's a good plan, if we can be assured of regular starting minutes in the top competition, top league in the world, then, you know, why would they not look at Arsenal? I think more the effect is, and again, you know, the Kroenkes and Josh Kroenke said in the program, they'll give them all the support they can. My suspicion is that failing to get top four, when we look back on it, we'll say it meant they couldn't do some business that would have been nice to do, but wasn't right at the top of the list. They will, you know, they'll get their striker, they'll get a new midfielder, and maybe it's not the absolute dream target that they had on their Champions League list, and they do have plans for every contingency. I think the Conference League they treat as basically no European football. So they had, you know, there are plans in place. Maybe you don't get the superstar midfielder, but I think really what it's more about is you can't do quite as many little things on the side. You can't add the, you know, you can't maybe strengthen both fullback positions. It will be things like that, I think, that we'll see, rather than
or two. Yeah, it's one centre midfielder, not two, and you extend on any.
Yeah, I mean, part of me did think the fact that he was literally signing the contract extension within an hour of the final whistle did make you think, would they have offered this if Norwich had beaten Spurs on the final day? Obviously we don't know, and no one's going to say, we actually would not have done that. But I think maybe something like the second central midfielders might not happen there. Might not happen.
Cool. Next one then, I guess a bit related to us dropping off again. Should we be worried about players like Saka and Gabriel leaving? Obviously, Gabriel's been linked quite a lot across the continent, like Barcelona, Juve. Saka's not really had strong links anywhere, but obviously his contract now into his final 2 years. And there's been a little bit of speculation around some kind of Champions League clause or something coming in the future of his contracts. But yeah, what's your take on that this summer?
This summer, not hugely. I mean, Gabriel, it's a summer where they you know, they're going to sit down and talk to his representatives again. You know, I was told a few months back that he was on the list of players they wanted to give a new contract to. Now, you know, at some stage, players of that quality will want to be playing in the Champions League. But this summer, I don't think there's any cause for concern. And I think someone like Gabriel, if he went, it would be kind of because Arsenal could feel like they could make a good profit on him and maybe upgrade. in that position. I think they would want to be selling, or they would be selling someone like Gabriel from a position of strength where they've identified someone to replace him, not just, we've got to sell to balance the books. I mean, having said that, these players are going to grow, and if they grow faster than Arsenal, like, it will happen at some stage. The one thing that's in the back of my mind entirely speculatively after everything that happened with Kylian Mbappe is if at some stage, and wouldn't be this summer, and he's probably not at that level yet, but if Real Madrid decide they want a sort of talismanic forward, it wouldn't shock me if one day, they're looking at players like Saka, looking at players like Martinelli. And he's a good, and Arteta would tell you as well, this is good. It's a lot better than a few years ago where no one wanted Arsenal's players, and even then when Arsenal, were signing Real Madrid and Barcelona's cast-offs as well as Ozil and Sanchez did. I would be worried to an extent that this club can't fulfill the ambitions of talented young footballers, but equally, it's not something that would give me sleepless nights this summer.
Yeah, and I think that's why this summer on the incoming front, it feels so important, because this is the first, as you say, in years that we've heard sort of our best players being linked elsewhere. You can live with that for a bit and probably, keep them looking elsewhere for a while. But if we don't get to Champions League next season as well, then I think it might be time to worry. So,
although I find, I'm sure we all see this on our social media, and I think definitely yesterday gave me a really clear sense of how social media and the fans at the ground and those guys, not that anyone's better, but that one does not reflect the other, and one does not necessarily, the loudest people on social media aren't necessarily reflective of the atmosphere of the club. Anyway, this is a roundabout way of saying, I think you see a lot on there, the idea that every other team's going to get better. Arsenal can't sign good players now. They've missed out on Champions League, and every other team will get better. Tottenham will do this. Man United will do this. And I would just offer a word of caution on that. We know, in Antonio Conte's post-match press conference yesterday, he was offering no guarantees that he would stick around. And, I think certainly they've got a better hand in keeping him. But do I think Conte's there for the long haul? No. We know that Manchester United have to do what Ralph Rangnick termed open heart surgery on their squad. And then you have Chelsea, who are about to lose at least two of their best defenders, having also sold the likes of Fikayo Tomori and Mark Gay. Hard to know what this summer will bring from them. They're so far away from sitting down and understanding who they might be able to sign. I think the idea that this is Arsenal's moment has gone and it'll be another generation before it comes back, it just doesn't, to me, chime with the football landscape right now. Arsenal have work to do, but they know what it is, and they've got players that they can assume will be better next season than they were at the start of this.
Yeah, and I mean, just to echo that, our points tally would have got top 4 the last 3 seasons, I think, before this. So, yeah, it always feels like worst case scenario, we've missed the boat, everyone's going to be better. But as you say, there's so many scenarios that could play out, I think, with Chelsea's whole situation, what's happening around there. Who knows what will happen with the manager there as well, as things unfold. United, there's a presumption that they'll just be able to switch it all on and start performing perfectly next season. But as we've seen at Arsenal, it can take several transfer windows to get rid of the culture that they seem to have festering in the players, something similar to what we had. And yeah, Spurs, I mean, start the season badly, has a strop, who knows?
Yeah.
I imagine the odds aren't that short on Conte not being the manager at the end of next season for whatever reason. Final thing that has come in, James, people wanted to know some realistic centre midfield signings, and we touched on it a bit earlier, but whether you think there'll be 1 or 2 additions to that part of the pitch.
So obviously the top target at the moment is Yuri Tielemans, and this is an area where I know Arsenal would like, that doesn't have to be, but would like someone with Premier League experience. The Ruben Neves stuff has gone a little bit colder than it was last summer. but it's fair to say that last summer there was genuine interest in him. I think at the moment, a team like Barcelona is looking at him, and it might depend on how the Frankie de Jong situation shakes out. In terms of 1 or 2, I think that really will depend on Granit Xhaka's future. If he stays around, then I think you're talking 1, because obviously then just purely in numerical terms, you'll have El Neni, Lokonga, Xhaka, Partey, and the new central midfielder. And again, like we were saying, that might have been something that would have been different if they were in the Champions League. But yeah, Tielemans is the most likely option. I know he's not someone that catches the imagination of everyone, and I think there's work to be done. I wonder how much of it is just though that kind of Leicester have gone off the boil this season. We shall see. There's been a lot of dialogue around that, and wouldn't shock me if that one happened at all.
Does feel like that seems the most likely, and I can see his qualities and I'll get behind him. But when we've missed out by 2 points and his pass gave Tottenham that win, it just feels, I don't know. I can't get over it. I actually tweeted the night he did it, "You'll never hear me mention Tielemans' name again after this," and a screenshot of where he passed the ball.
I was at that game, and I had in the 90 whatever minute where they were 2-1 up, I had written my Spurs are making, it was sort of very condescending wouldn't be the wrong word, piece on Tottenham, where it's sort of like, yeah, well done guys, yeah, you're making real progress under Antonio Conte, but it's I'm not sure it's going to be it. And then those 2 minutes, it wasn't just that it was like, okay, this could be quite a significant moment for the whole season. It was also like, and Christ, I have to completely rewrite this piece. Did not enjoy that in the slightest.
Nightmare. Well, let's see what happens with that one. But James, been lovely to have you on, chatting through the squad, and I'm sure we'll chat again at some point this summer. Just say that you came on this podcast at the end of January, I think, and I was saying we've let so many players go, surely we're bringing someone in, and you said no, it doesn't look like we probably will. And I thought,
sorry about that.
I still didn't believe you afterwards. I thought surely the amount of people we let go, but you were right. So a bit more optimistic this time. Obviously, there's no scenario where no player comes in. Otherwise, it'd be a bit of a challenging season. Transfer ban for some backhand deals. Who knows? Hopefully not.
3 more years of Lacazette. Oh, I hope not.
Right. Thanks very much, James.
Thanks for having me.
Now on to a new section of the podcast. We're going to look at some statements where we give guests 89 seconds for each statement in honour of Anfield 89 to deliberate something which I or the team have put together as something which may generate mixed opinion, I guess. And what better way to debate something with mixed opinion than to reintroduce JB, the much missed JB from the podcast. JB, how are you doing? Where have you been?
Hello, Ollie. Good to see you. Good to be back. Just in time for 3 months of no football. But obviously great to be back. I can't remember my last pod. It was a month ago, maybe more. I've been off in the real world, starting a business, which has been great. But sadly left me no time for podcasting, even though I've been following and obviously definitely listened to everything you guys have done, he says.
Well, it's good you've done that, because these statements are actually just questions on what we've said in the last month.
So your statements are questions.
So we're going to whiz through these slides. If you're watching
great Photoshop, by the way, on the mosaic.
Yeah,
I know you want a credit for that.
I won't get done for copyright, surely, with that mosaic. If anyone queries, I've drawn it.
Not a lawyer, so you can't answer that.
I've drawn it, okay, from scratch. So I'm mindful some people will still be listening audio only. So what I'll do, JB, is I'll flick the slide over, I will read it out, and then I'm going to give you 89 seconds to debate. I would like some time in that 89 seconds to also voice some opinion, but I understand that may be difficult for you. So we'll see.
Do I have to go true or false? Can I sit on the fence for any of them, or do I have to kind of?
No, you've got to swing one way or the other. I think
they all depend, right?
No, not allowed. So first one then. Arsenal will spend more than 150 million this summer.
It depends if we're talking net
We
spend
started
or
with depends.
gross spend.
Let's say gross spend.
What was last summer? 150 also.
It was around that, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think true. And I think we will have 2 big signings. I'm going to contradict myself here. I think we'll have like a 60 to 80 million player,
Mm-hmm.
like a 50 million player, and like a 30 million player, which gets you to about 140 to 160 mil, he says, having not done the maths, something like that.
Mm.
And then like bits and pieces, which will take us over. So like if we did Jesus plus a forward plus Tielemans, I think you're getting to like 130 close anyway. And we'll probably sign 1 or 2 others. So yeah, I think we'll get to 150, but assume we'll probably need to bring in tens of millions through the outgoing players.
Mm. Do you think both those big ones will be forwards? The most expensive.
I think they should be. So I think the biggest transfer we do will be a striker. I think we're all probably agreed on that. I think we'll bring in a net 1 central midfielder. So
Time's up.
it will be
89 seconds. There you go. Next. If Tierney had never got injured, Arsenal would have won the Europa League last season and made top 4 this season.
I'm going to say false, true. So therefore, if it's one statement, it's false. I don't know. I don't think we were good enough to win the Europa League last season, and that Villarreal team, whilst unbelievably boring, we've seen in the Champions League that they aren't terrible. And I just don't think we were there last season. So false on that. Probably true on this. I think if either Tierney or Partey doesn't get injured, we make top 4.
Mm. And I guess, yeah, it is a little bit mixed because had we won the Europa League last season, we're in the Champions League this season. Does that make it harder to get top 4 this season?
I think we would have won the league this season.
We would have, maybe,
Yeah,
with the
on.
extra money.
Yeah, exactly. Just kick on.
That one's pretty definitive. I would say, on the face of it, it's got a good argument because we collapsed in both races sort of after his injury both years, and both times this season less so, but the manager attempted to play Xhaka at left back, lost that control of the midfield. And I say this season less so because he did it for a shorter period, but ultimately that Brighton game, when he did do it and left Lokonga by himself in midfield, that could have been what cost us. So yeah, I lean towards yes, optimistically.
I also think that if you got rid of Xhaka at left back for that one game against Brighton, we probably still would have done top 4. So.
Next one then, Gabriel Martinelli will become a better player than Bukayo Saka.
False. I think
Your
that
reason?
Saka is already at superstar level. I think he's getting better every game. And I think he can go on to be one of the best players in the world. I mean, he's already probably one of the better players in the league. I just don't think it's landed and being accepted yet more universally. Martinelli has a lot of potential. I can see him going on to be a great player, a great goal scorer. I think Saka's game is more all-rounded. He's a better technical player and he's more intelligent. So, look, it's possible, but I just think Saka's got the edge and probably got a better skill set to kind of reach the very top.
Yeah, there's always been... I think there's just been a feeling in the fan base that Martinelli had the highest ceiling, but I think this season, what Saka, as you say, the level he's already elevated himself to, makes it hard to see Martinelli eclipsing that. But
I think Martinelli will score more goals, but that's probably it.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be shocked if he did, would you? He's got the tools there to do it.
And it's fine margins as well, right? Martinelli could blow up and just start putting up unbelievable numbers, and Saka could stay at this level, which is still a good level, but not go any further. But I think the probability has to be with Saka.
Yeah, I agree. Right on time. Next one then. Arsenal have overachieved this season.
False. I think top 4 would have been. I think we've probably hit bang on, plus or minus a bit, but bang on where our squad is at, our talent level is at, and probably expectations for the next step for the club. I think it was, Europa League was the next step and was a step up from where we were, sadly. Would have loved Champions League, but I think that would have been, with the age profile of the squad, a big jump. So, yeah, I think we've achieved and therefore not overachieved. False.
Yeah, I think it's probably fair. I would say par would probably be 6 for me. So very slightly overachieved, but I think because we did nothing serious in the cups. I know we got to a League Cup semi-final, but never really threatened in either cup. Did very poorly in the FA Cup. I think that kind of brings it down to just about par. I think it depends how you look at it, right? If you look at with the squad we had at the end of the season, I think he has done well to get us even to 5th. But then how much of that decision to have such a thin, weakened squad was it on the manager, or was it the technical director saying you've got to do this for the long term? Because if it was nothing to do with him, done well to get top 6, I'd say. But a lot will depend on what happens next season for me on that one. And this, I guess, links into a little bit. The next one is Arteta has done a good job as Arsenal manager.
True. On balance, true, because I think there is more to being the manager than just what we've seen on the pitch. I think there's been progress on the pitch. I think a lot of that's been to do with squad turnover, recruitment, etc. I think the soft factors are probably overstated, but I think they were still important, and we are still in the process of turning around a club and undoing a lot of bad decisions that have been made, probably, honestly, for 5+ years. And therefore the task was bigger than just, get X, Y, Z out of players on the pitch. So on balance, yes, I think he's done a good job. Could he have done a better job? Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to judge right now. I think we all get carried away and familiar with players. When you look at the names that have been on the pitch in recent months, I mean, the talent level in certain areas is poor. I have a feeling this will come back and be like those, those screenshots we see from 10 years ago that were like Wenger got top 4 with this, or we made the Champions League final with this. I think this will be one of those teams where we look back and realize everyone was either like 20 years old or rubbish. So I think just about this season's kind of pushed us into the doing a good job bit.
Yeah. I would say.
And look, there have been probably 3 times in his reign that I've thought it was right for him to go, but I'm not there now.
Exactly the same for me. I think this season alone, good steps made. A lot depends on this summer, as I say, to back that up. In what he's done in other areas of the squad. If you look at his tenure as a whole in the 2.5 years, I think it's probably false so far. We had a bit of a reset last summer, and now everyone's on the same path. Everyone's buying into it. We can see what the club are doing, and fair play to Arteta for sort of driving that change as well across all levels of the club, I think. Last one then. Balogun will become a better player than Nketiah.
This is a hard one because it's hard to project, right? So I think the gulf between them now is probably bigger than we thought, and I can see why Nketiah is being used more. But I think we're getting a better picture of his talent level. Balogun has looked better at every level he's played at, but the only evidence we have is a 6-month loan in the Championship where he's been good, but like fine. So I would. This is going to be a guess. I think that the evidence would, if I had to put my money on it, I would say no. If I had to kind of guess, I would say yes, just because he's rated higher, and clearly we've chosen to keep him over Nketiah. But there are a lot of players that show the promise Balogun has and don't even get to the level Eddie's at now. I think Eddie's now at a higher level than we probably all thought he was. So, I think the most likely answer to this is no, but I really hope it's yes, and I think he's got the ability to far exceed Eddie's level.
Yeah, I would agree. With not much time, I'd just say Balogun probably, as I say, less likely because he's already got a way to go, but has more tools, more of an all-round game to perhaps make it at the highest level if everything goes his way. Cool. That's the end of the statements section.
Did you agree with me on all of those?
I think I did. I should have put something in about Cedric.
Wow.
Was it Cedric's fault for the goal
Everything.
on Sunday?
Everything is Cedric's fault.
Was his goal a cross?
Yes.
There you go.
True.
Well, next time,
It's a
more
mishead
controversial. We're going to have a little look now at some of the data behind the season. There's been a lot of debate, I guess, between people who like what the club are doing and the probably minority who don't see it at this stage. And what better way to try and back up an argument than a little bit of data? So we're hoping to have Carl from the podcast on. He couldn't make it himself, but he sent some very interesting information for us to have a little chat through. So if you're listening to the audio only, this is probably where it gets a little bit more difficult to follow, but we will try and explain.
Ollie's going to give a nice visual description of everything. He's told me he's a data expert now.
I'll try. So are we improving? The first way to look at that then is at some of these radars that StatsBomb produce. Essentially what it is it compiles a lot of different performance statistics. And then the further you are to the edge, the better. So if that entire radar was covered in a blue bat-looking shape, it would be brilliant. So what you can see, what you can see in the red is Arsenal last season, and this is all attacking-based metrics. And I thought it was quite interesting, JB, because our attacking numbers are yet to explode, and that has been probably the one criticism consistently of Arteta's football. But there's been a lot of talk this season, obviously, about a lack of options up front and whether that has been down to more the manager and style of play and whether he'll ever be able to get a load of goals out of this team or whether it is strictly down to personnel. Looking at the data there and also your overall thoughts on that, really, what do you think? Can you see an Arteta side ever getting to sort of 70, 80 goals a season?
It's hard, right? I think that some of the performance and output stuff is, obviously influenced by coaching, but also influenced by talent. And I think, number one, we've got a very young attacking group. And, quite frankly, the output just hasn't quite been there as talented as Saka and Martinelli people are. Right? I just think we haven't seen the force of nature that some of the better teams or the higher placed teams in the league have at their disposal, and players who will just create good chances out of nothing. So I think there's a recruitment angle to it. And I think Arteta's signed, we've signed one offensive player under Arteta, and that was Willian. And by all accounts, this is the summer. We've done the defence, we've done the keeper, we've done some of the midfield, and now it's right. This is the summer of the forwards. And there's a bit of an improvement on this chart, right? But it's not enormous. There's a bit of a bump in XG, and I think the can Arteta coach attacking football question. I think we've moved up the pitch and we're playing higher up the pitch. And what you see here is probably more indicative of a change in playing style than kind of improvement or kind of a better team, right? So you've got more shots from the high press. I don't think we pressed high at all really last season or the season before. I don't know what our pressing numbers look like, but the fact we're generating more off the press suggests we are playing a bit differently. And obviously got some quite big goals from that, particularly from Eddie more recently. Scoring more set pieces.
Huge one, absolutely. Isn't it, with the new coach? We've gone from pretty much zero there to
more than 0.
3.
And you look on the right, it's percentile as well. So set piece XG 70th percentile, which is pretty good. When you look at set piece goals, I think the top 4 in the league are City, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Brentford, which shows, right, it's not just about size, it's about sophistication. And broadly, those are the 4 teams that are, the other three are teams that we would consider smart teams that are embracing data and coaching in a good way. And therefore, to see us up there with them is encouraging. And the other very obvious thing here, we'll come to the XG per shot, but the goalkeeper pass length, right, which kind of tallies with what we've seen with Ramsdale coming in for Leno. I think that, we are clearly passing actually longer more by the looks of this, right?
Yeah,
which,
really
like, when you
interesting,
actually look at it in games, it's basically more varied. We were playing out from the back as much as possible, but we had that outlet. And City do it as well, where if you've got a keeper who can put it in behind the opposition back line, they can't squeeze you in the same way. Now, I think like the Newcastle game, we defaulted to it way too much. And
it's
we were much
interesting because
better
I think on that
against
one we're
Seven.
looking at a mean, aren't we? And I think if you took like a median average,
It would be like a bell curve, wouldn't it? It would
Yeah.
be we basically go short or really long.
yeah, because Ramsdale has got that pass in his locker, hasn't he? Just to ping it out to the wingers. You never saw Leno doing a quick kick straight to the
I
forwards.
vaguely remember Leno he liked to clip to a fullback or out of play quite often, and he couldn't get the distance on it. So yeah, so I think this all in all is kind of more of a playing style change rather than a quality change. Obviously, XG's up a bit, and we are taking slightly lower quality shots, which I'm sure has nothing to do with Thomas Partey and Nuno playing.
So just switching it slightly then. So now we're looking at, in the red, Arsenal from this season. So same as what we've seen in the last slide. But the blue is the league average, which kind of dampens the improvement side a little bit because we're looking less improved. Obviously, we've improved from the previous season, but when you compare it to the league average, we don't have a dominating bat on this radar. But I guess one thing to note is how high we are in shots. And as you sort of touched on there with certain personnel shooting, maybe it's not always the best quality, but this team is definitely shooting a lot more than it was last season. And also it's 88th percentile in the league. So we're taking nearly 2.5 shots more on average than other teams. Yeah, what do you make about that? Do you think that's instruction, JB, just to sort of get more shots? Do you think Arsenal are looking at this data and saying we weren't shooting enough last season?
I'm sure they're looking at it. I would obviously like to see shot volume and kind of shot quality both go up, right? I think there's a question on, is it worth trading off shot quality for shot volume? I'm sure Carl has the actual answer to that. But also, if you look at the bits where we do slightly outperform, we're getting crosses in more than average. I think some of those are, I assume the cutback type, the low crosses do fit that. So, we do like getting it wide and pulling it across the box. Certain fullbacks like crossing from absolutely anywhere. But I think in general, we are a bit of a get it wide and get it in the box team. We are not very strong centrally. Again, don't know whether it's a deliberate tactic or whether it's a function of where we play. And again, you see it with kind of central, counter-attacking shots as well. We're quite deliberate in how we build up, right? So we are, we don't really counter. We kind of regain, regroup, and go. And that's probably also.
So what we're looking at now is how Arsenal rank in counter-attacking shots. We are 18th in the league, which is really interesting. When you look at Spurs, who are up in third, obviously beating us to that top 4 spot, and very deadly on the counter. There is a perception that Arsenal
Watford at the top, right?
Yeah. Watford second, Liverpool top. No real surprise there. I guess, to note, Man City win the league. They are down in, that's 14th, 15th. So it's not saying you have to be really good at this, but I find it interesting because there has been a perception that we are perhaps getting better in transition and counter-attacking, but what this shows is
there's a legs thing as well, right? Like it's not just the tactical, are we set up for it? But Liverpool have their way of countering, which is bodies at speed. Spurs have their, Kane drops deep and spams it into space. United have legs and passers. They've got a number of players in their team who can pick out that long ball into space behind a defence. We've had Lacazette through the middle for a lot of the season, which means that if we are going to score on the counter, that run needs to come from our wide players. if they're tucking and fending, they're already quite deep. So I think our system has not lent itself to counter-attacking. When you've got players like Eddie and when you've got players like Martinelli, it's much more of an option.
I guess this next slide shows a little bit on something called deep completions, which you can explain what that means, JB, because I know you've done your research. But if we're trying to be,
that's what you mean.
if we're trying to be a Man City sort of light style, we saw on the last one we both were ranking towards the bottom. On this one, Man City clear winners in the league, and Arsenal up in third. So take it away, JB. Deep completions.
So Google says that deep completions are basically passes or completed passes within 20 yards of the goal, and they exclude crosses. So this is basically our ability to play football near the opposition goal. And as we do pass into the box a lot, we do our little combination things on the edge of the box a lot more than we have done, especially on the left, it's the kind of fullback, left forward combos. It's the Nuno and Martinelli 1-2s. And on the right, it's usually Saka and Ødegaard who combine really well there. And I think one of my biggest issues last season was when we would get the whole 5 lanes of attack and positioning, and it was quite rigid and people were too far apart. So I think there is probably a correlation between, us getting players closer together and actually seeing those combinations pay off now in volume. But clearly, that's not quite getting, it's not quite manifesting itself in the goals and chances yet.
But does this show, is this an encouraging stat to show the difference a couple of top quality forwards could make? Because clearly we're getting the ball in the right areas.
Completely. And if you were good at your job, you would have had our deep completions versus last season as well. But I'm sure you haven't got that.
Well, we'll criticise Carl. I'm working off his screenshots, guys.
I'm not criticising Carl because he sent us this stuff, but I can criticise you for not asking.
Fair enough. Very quickly going to scan over defence. This one just shows Arsenal last season and this season, which basically shows a very similar defensive performance, which
I don't think this is fair, right? I think this season's a season of 3 halves, and one of those 3 halves.
Injuries, right?
Not just that, right? But there was kind of a pre-Christmas bit, a post-Christmas bit, and then the post-international break. But there was like a 2 or 3 month period, I think actually pre-Christmas, where our defence was the best in the league.
Yeah.
And from an XG against perspective, basically at a title level. Yeah. And it's no coincidence that's when we had consistently Ramsdale playing well. But we also had Tomiyasu, White, Gabriel, and Tierney fit, and we also had Partey fit, and it just worked really well. I also think that we've traded off a bit of defensive security for offensive output more recently. Again, it's really hard to unpick that because it's hard to know how much that's tactical choice versus personnel. Because clearly you get more offensively from Cedric than you do from Tomiyasu, but you lose a lot defensively. Similarly, Nuno gives you quite a lot going forward, even if he's kind of inconsistent. And Tierney does, but he was hanging back a bit more at times. So it's hard to tell with this how much is deliberate or not. But I think there was a time when we were very, very solid defensively. And, you've got the XG, the net XG chart, right? We started the season pretty badly. You can see the XG conceded being pretty kind of dry. I mean, there's no intervals on the axis except for both ends, right? But you can see in the middle of the season, there was a point at which our XG against just fell, right? It just really came down. And I assume it kind of picked up again post-Partey injury when we started basically taking more risks to get the goals again. But yeah, there's a very good bit in the middle there you can see, right, where I think it must be December and January from memory. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but we really kind of nailed it defensively, and we were suddenly just hitting everything going forward. It was that period where we beat Leeds and we beat whoever else.
Yeah, well, really a very strong run, didn't we? But yeah, I just thought I'd quickly jump to this slide because you were sort of talking about the different periods in the season, and that's exactly what this shows. It shows the net difference in XG. So expected goals, and what the graph is showing us for people listening in is a very purple period at the start, which means you've got a net loss in XG. So you're conceding more chances, expected goals than you are creating. But then, as you say, that there isn't intervals here, but it looks like sort of, I would guess around November time, Arsenal start to get some really good numbers there. And it's worth noting, JB, that even at the end of the season here, where we've had a bit of a wobble and lost, what was it, 5 and 8 or something really bad.
Don't remember.
But there's no purple there. We can see, as you sort of say, the XG conceded goes up, and that's probably after the Partey, Tierney, Tomiyasu injuries. But we've still actually been creating more than
I think
we haven't.
What we're also seeing is that StatsBomb have missed a real opportunity here to invert these colours. So when you're doing really well, you can call it a purple patch, but their purple patch is actually negative.
Very true.
Someone needs to have a word. But like, we weren't. So some of this is game state as well, right? So Palace, for example, scored and then sat off, and we created a lot and didn't score. I can't remember. The Brighton game was actually probably similar. It should have been 1-1 at half time, and then they nicked it again. And the Southampton game, I think we were comfortably the better team. So we lost those games, but it doesn't surprise me that performance-wise, or when you take XG into account, especially with game state where we were chasing, it looks favourable. Similarly, a lot of the ones where we were in that purple bit were the opposite, where we were kind of clinging on to win games, and the XG again reflects game state. So it's
what I would say,
it doesn't tell a story on its own, but it is it's going in a positive direction with a bit of a blip at the end, basically.
Even with game state in mind, I'm looking back to that purple bit at the start of the season. We've got Palace was a purple game, and we were in the game state of losing that. A couple, pretty much the whole game, weren't we? We went behind twice. Obviously, City behind the whole game. Liverpool behind the whole game. United behind most of the game. So, yeah, game state definitely factors in, and you can't capture that. But I think that is a reassuring trend anyway, that even when we were really bad in terms of results, that things seem to be trending the right way. And that's what we really wanted to get from these stats section today, to try and give us some hope, I guess, after a bit of a disappointing couple of weeks, and give us something to look forward to next season. And I think a big thing we wanted to show is can the strikers we're targeting make a real difference for us next year? And I think we can probably conclude that if we get the right players in, they most certainly can. So thank you very much for joining our first visual Fresh Arsenal show. If you're still listening on the podcast, please come and check out the visuals as well. But very grateful for anyone who's listening anywhere, somewhere, listening in. Thank you very much. Please subscribe, brand new channel. If you're watching this early, you could be the first subscriber, or 100th or 1000th, depending on how successful this does. But we're looking to do probably one of these more visual shows. Yeah, probably let's commit to a year. But
one a decade.
I would like to do it monthly, especially over the summer. I'm sure we'll get some really interesting stuff on new arrivals that will be coming in. But this is a new show. So we'd really love to hear your feedback on what you liked, what you didn't like so much, and what we can do better next time. And if you haven't listened to the podcast already, we have been podcasting for a couple of years with a bit of a sabbatical in between. But come and subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you very much for watching or listening to the Fresh Arsenal podcast /show. I've been Ollie Price Bates, and JB
is still JB. Will be at Gunnerpunner on Twitter, as always.
Thank you very much.
Need to play some music out of this, get the atmosphere up.
I'll also add that in.
Dun.